Good evening, everybody. I am Patrick Murphy. I am the Goodrich Chair of Entrepreneurship at the University of Alabama at Birmingham, the Collette School of Business, and I direct the Frank Bearfield Entrepreneurship Program. Our purpose here tonight is to talk about our ecosystem. We're going to talk a lot about the Birmingham ecosystem, and we're going to talk about the flavor and the brand of entrepreneurship that we see here. I can't do it by myself, so I am joined on stage by a very powerful entrepreneur. We met sort of indirectly. I just finished Leadership Birmingham, and she's at the Women's Foundation, and they do incredible work here, and we'll learn more about that. Miss Zandra Jones is the individual I'm referring to. And for those of you online, please check out their website, the Women's Foundation. And Zandra, if you could introduce yourself a little bit. I have a bunch of questions teed up that I'll ask you after you do that, and then maybe we'll get the crowd going a little bit and have a great conversation.
Okay, wonderful. Very nice to meet you finally, and so great to see all of you. I love that he called me an entrepreneur. I think he was speaking that into existence. Anybody that knows me was probably like, oh, really? And my boss probably looking like, oh, okay. But I really am an advocate for entrepreneurship and have been for the last however many years since I switched into the nonprofit space from corporate. So, like Dr. Murphy said, my name is Zandra Jones. I am from Birmingham, Alabama. Left here after high school, came back about 10, 11 years ago, and transitioned from corporate America into the social sector. And I've been in philanthropy now, first with the Community Foundation of Greater Birmingham, and now with the Women's Foundation of Alabama. And for all of those years, I would say for those 8 years that I worked in those two spaces, I would say for 7 of them, I have been preaching the gospel of impact investing and social enterprise and trying to learn more about it. So I'm really happy to be on this stage having this conversation. The fact that it's happening means progress is happening in the city. So thank you.
All right. Wonderful. So let's jump right in. Like yourself, I've lived in different ecosystems and I've done entrepreneurial things in different places. And I know as well as you do, and you know as well as I do, that great entrepreneurship is downstream from local culture. And local culture is downstream from local history. So when we are able to articulate the why of entrepreneurship, that's when we get world-class outcomes and growth and impact. And I want to talk about how Birmingham is learning to understand what its why is. I personally don't think we're there quite yet. Maybe we can talk about that later or unpack that, but why? So what do we have in our history? We have justice issues. We have racial justice, social justice. We have issues of small groups mobilizing to affect change. These kinds of activities, which caught the attention of the nation and the world, are also what make world-class social enterprises work. So my theory, and this is what I want you to weigh in on, I think social enterprise is baked into the cake in Birmingham. I think it's something that we are able to do naturally, and we're not talking about it quite all the time yet. So we don't have to talk about impact investing or social enterprise yet, but I do want to talk about local culture. And as a Birmingham native, could you reflect a little bit on the values of how people do things here when they work together or when they maybe challenge an existing order to try to affect change? What are the kinds of things people do in Birmingham when they do that kind of work?
Wow. I love the way that you just articulated your view of Birmingham's history, particularly as someone who's been here for 7 years. Because I think what happens is when you have grown up in it, you sometimes don't see it the same way. And so I think that Birmingham and Alabama have what I've heard referred to as a low self-esteem when it comes to our place in the nation. And it's funny, I was just talking to a group in Montgomery about this, and I told them Birmingham and the South in particular made whatever Black folks are doing all over the country possible. the sacrifices that were made here, what you just spoke of in terms of mobilizing and really being resilient and defiant, if you will, demanding our rights, is something that I think is the legacy of this state and this city, and particularly the Black and white inhabitants that were here during that period. And as I remind my nieces and nephews, it lives within you. It's in you. And so I think as long as we can remind our young folks and our entrepreneurs of that instead of the opposite, which is, oh, Birmingham is oppressive, or Alabama is, oh, you still live in this, all of these little things that people say who are not from here that make people that are from here either feel the need to like defend themselves or to be inferior. I think as long as we can get folks to understand and realize the brilliance and resilience that resides within them just in the soil, I think when we can tap into that, then we can get into like that why and really solving those problems that lead to strong, successful social enterprises. Because our ancestors were solving a problem, right? Their rights weren't being respected. And there were different tactics that had been taken from all over different states and cities. But in Birmingham, they said, this is what we're solving for. That's what all nonprofits and social enterprises have to do. Figure out exactly what you're solving for. And this is going to be our approach. And finally, that kind of turned that switch and caused people to pay attention.
As an outsider, I built my career in the city of Chicago, and I have had more authentic conversations with individuals across racial and cultural and other types of boundaries here than I've had anywhere else. And that was one of the first things that struck me when I moved here, the authenticity that you could actually have a conversation with somebody about something you or they like or don't like, and just really get down to the truth of the matter, which is much better than if you're talking on multiple levels and kind of coding things with like whatever kind of political correctness you want to put in there, rather than just get down to the truth, but in a respectful way where people can connect and learn more about each other, because of their differences, not in spite of their differences. So Birmingham definitely has that. And I'm just speaking as a relative outsider, someone who didn't grow up here. And that excites me about entrepreneurship. So one thing you said about the movements and the mobilizations struck me, and it reminded me of something I think about a lot. Anything great, a great movement, a great idea, anything of great size or force, even great love or great passion, whenever anything is great, error is also great. And I think there is good and bad in anything that moves, anything that grows. There's going to be good and bad in it. Zandra, why do you think we in our ecosystem talk more about, I'm going to go out on a limb here, you can disagree with me if you want. Why do you think we talk more about the bad and less about the good? And if you agree with that or don't agree with that, I want to know how we can talk more about the good and less about the bad, because there were great victories in the struggle, in the movement. There were great victories, and there's dark histories that need to be remembered and respected and learned from. But to focus on the positive and the breaking through and the good, that close to social enterprise. I mean, that's great social enterprise right there. So how can we, or maybe we are, how can we start focusing more on the good and looking forward in a positive way rather than looking back in a negative way?
And I'm thinking you're referring specifically to our history. Yeah, I think you answered the question just a couple statements ago. And I think it's whenever people don't want to acknowledge what has occurred, particularly the bad, then I think people feel the need to constantly remind you that it happened. This state, our country, has not reckoned with what happened in the United States regarding Black folks. And that is not to say that they don't recognize we were enslaved, right? But Jim Crow and all of the downstream effects that come from it are things that our country has not reconciled. And so I think that's why it keeps coming up, because we keep trying to push it down. Yeah, that's what I think. What do y'all think? I mean, Yeah. I mean, I don't want it to,
See a lot of heads
I
nodding
don't,
out there.
I don't think it should impact where we go from here.
Okay.
But to your point, it does often stifle us. And I
It
think
does.
that's why.
Let me frame it. Let me frame it from a Chicago perspective. So, I was in Chicago 20 years, built my career there. City of Chicago was dominated by organized crime for a long time, 80 years, 90 years. Um, and a lot of the same practices that the mob used are still there. Um, Juice loans became these kind of weird payday loan situations. Exorbitant business taxes derived from protection money. The numbers became the lottery. We have an aldermanic system that reflects like street crews. It's all there, but it's sanitized. And the way the city runs now, there's a lot of good in that, and that's a dark history, mind you. That's a very dark history. But it's emerged into something or evolved. That's the word I'll use. Evolved into something. Do you think there are um, dominant trends or narratives in the civil rights movement that world-class social enterprise could learn from to do world-class social enterprise that we wouldn't be able to do in any other city in the country?
Wow. I think in order to do world class social enterprise, you have to know very narrowly what you are solving for, just to come back to that again. And I think that is what they could probably carry away from that movement. I think the spirit of cooperation that also occurred during that time. I think when I look at Birmingham and just having worked in this space now for the last 8 or 9 years, I see a lot of cooperation. I see a lot of folks that are championing one another. And I can't say that that necessarily has evolved from the civil rights movement, but I do think that it is a part of Birmingham's legacy that we are a city where people come together to cooperate toward the achievement of a goal. Yeah. And so that, and then knowing what that goal is specifically, or what I would say.
One thing I've noticed here in the authenticity in the conversations that I mentioned earlier is you got to know what the problem is specifically, and if you can't state it, which is the way it is in some other cities, you can't really attack it or engage it or resolve it if you can't state it clearly in a way that is intelligible to other people. We we do act local here very well, and it's important to think global but act local. I agree with you 100%. It's been my experience that folks come together here to do things in a way that actually took me about a year to figure out. It took me about a year to learn the culture here because I've raised money in Chicago, I've built things in Chicago. Now I've done it here. Completely different logics. Completely different logics. In the city of Chicago, you don't tell anybody what you're going to do. You operate in stealth mode for a long time. And then when you launch, you go big, you go hard, and you go to war. And a lot of the people out there are not going to like what you're doing. Some are, but the ones who don't like it, you fight with them and you go to war with them. You win those battles, you got your program. That won't work here. It will not work here. And I figured it out pretty quickly. The way, in my experience, it works here is I tell people what I'm going to do before I do it. And word spreads because they tell everybody else and their cousin and their parents and all their friends, and it spreads. And that energy comes back around to me and it's supportive. You do that in Chicago, they'll cut you off at the knees. But that works here, and I like it better. And it's local action. Here's my question for you. What I would like is to work on the global thinking. And there are two ways to think global. One is to look at other places. I know you've lived in California and you've lived in DC and you lived here. So you know how to think global just out of the truth and the virtue of your experiences. But another way to think global is not to go anywhere and to learn through history. To be in one place but think through time, rather to be in one time and go to different places. And Birmingham's rich history, I think, is a good way to start elevating the thinking and expanding the thinking about how to solve these problems, because social entrepreneurs solve problems related to culture, they affect policy change, they help marginalized groups, they help with education, they help with food, all these basic values that are near and dear to the human condition that we can learn about and learn creative ways to solve them if we just expand our mind. Because if you look at what's right in front of you, all you're going to see is the problem. You know, when you expand the mind, then you can find solutions, creative ones to the problem. So what do you have to say, Zandra, about the thinking styles here? I know the action is great. The local action is awesome here, but the thinking, where do we need to go? What do we need to do to move forward as a social enterprise hub?
That's a great question. I think one of the things that happens here, especially from a nonprofit or funder's perspective, is people think we have limited resources. And so we often have a scarcity kind of mindset. And so I think that can be challenging to then widen your aperture or widen your lens and try to think globally because you're really focused pretty myopically on trying to just survive or move forward or do that one thing that you say that you do. And so when I think about how to change that, I think that's a really good question. And I would probably put it back on you as the professor. But like really thinking about like how do we get people to think critically and think about problem solving. I was telling you I was in Montgomery Friday for a conversation at the Montgomery Museum of Fine Art, and there was a venture capitalist there, and someone asked her, how can Montgomery become the social enterprise, or it was something like the capital of XYZ, no, tech, the tech hub of the South. And she said, I don't think you should become the tech hub. I think that you should, what you said, lean into what it is that you do well, right? And the other thing she said, though, was that a lot of times we hear about entrepreneurs who had this idea at midnight, and then there's this fairy tale of how they developed this great idea, and all of a sudden people were really interested. And she said, no, that's actually not what happens. Normally, that's like what they tell you happened. But what actually happens is people get into a room, 3 or 4 folks, and they say, what problem can we solve? What industry has a problem that we can solve? And they go through hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of ideas. And so I say all of that to say, like, again, that is just stretching your thinking. And so if there was a way that we could look at broader problem solving together, and then just kind of how we ask questions, I think that's how I would suggest we change kind of the thinking here. But how would you say we do it?
Well, you hit the nail on the head because all entrepreneurship starts with problems. And if you chase problems, it takes you out of your comfort zone pretty quickly. It will, because when we think of that word problem, it has a negative connotation to it. It's like, I got a problem. That means something negative. But one way to work, and this is what we do in our program at UAB, in the entrepreneurship program, we work on the mindset hard. We really drill this into our learners, into our community. In a lot of world languages, the word for problem and the word for question are the same word. There's no difference, same word. The only difference is the context in which they are used. So if you say I have a question versus I have a problem, here in our culture, it hits a little bit differently. The connotation, the implication, a little bit different. We work real hard on training the entrepreneurs to think of problems as questions. Problems call for solutions, questions call for answers. It is driven by your curiosity, which is an entrepreneurial superpower. So keeping those journals, like, so I'm taking notes right over there, man, she's writing this down, like writing down these questions that you come up with, usually in the morning, and you better write them down because you'll forget them, or in the shower when you're not like using your executive functions and you relax and all the genius part of your brain comes to the surface, or you're on a run or whatever it may be. Capture those interesting questions, because a question is when you start to think. An answer is when you stop thinking. You read a book, you close the cover, you may not pick it up again. You're reading it because you don't know what's in there yet. That's a question. But in our mind, in the entrepreneurial mind, it's a problem. So that principle can be extended to social problems. Like, why don't they have enough to eat over there? Why are they eating unhealthy food? Why don't they have education? Like, why? Questions about that, and then that gives you a nice platform to innovate in relation to. If you don't fix problems and if you instead try to sell solutions all the time, you're not going to finish the race. You have to ask questions, and 90% of them you may not be able to answer, but all the negative value and time sunk in wild goose chases around those 90%, the weight of that negative value will be outweighed by the positive value of the one of the 10 that you hit, that you do get traction on. And that's how the great like asymmetry of human existence works. That's how ecosystems evolve, this trial and error, trial and error. So just talking about that right here, we probably did something already right here. Somebody got something out of what we've been saying that may make $1 million in the next 5 years, and more of that, like buy everybody.
5%, just 5%. Um, what you just said made me think, you've probably heard this saying about don't fall in love with your product or your solution, right? You have to constantly ask the question. And so as I think about this group, well, how many folks here work for nonprofits? Anybody? Or do nonprofits? And then how many of you are in business, like corporate, for profit kind of? Yeah, okay, both. Um, Instead of saying, I want to open this shelter, like you just said, or this food pantry, I want to know why aren't these people, why don't they have access to food, right? I think about a project that Alicia and I have been working on with the Child Care Accelerator. Childcare access is an issue in the state of Alabama. I wanted to solve for accessibility, affordability, and workforce. And so the question was, what are all the different ways that you could potentially solve for that? Well, one of the ways you can solve for accessibility is to open more childcare locations. How can you do that? Maybe you could start an accelerator. You call the fine folks over at ASL Creative and see if they can help you develop a curriculum, right? Get some funders to kind of partner with us on that, help us pilot it. And now we have this amazing Advancing Alabama Childcare Business Accelerator. But it really came from like asking these questions. And I think the more questions you ask, ideally, the higher quality questions you then ask, and then the higher quality your answers.
100%. And the quality comes oftentimes, unfortunately, through the quantity, meaning fall down 9 times, stand up one. You got to like have 9 bad ones before you get to the one good one, oftentimes. I want to say a little bit about social enterprise, then we'll try to encourage these guys to ask some questions. Um, we mentioned nonprofit. I want to just get this out there. I think a lot of you know it already, but social enterprise is different from nonprofit work. It's also different from for-profit work. It's a third way. It generates social impact, meaning more people staying in school, more people clothed, more people have enough to eat, whatever that may be, whatever the social cause is. It generates that through transactions, like a business. Oftentimes, the transactions are a little bit more complicated than what you see in a traditional business, meaning, a customer pays you money, you give them something. Usually, social enterprise is a little bit more, maybe involving 2 or 3 or 4 partners, but it is fee-based revenue and earned income. And the reason that's better from an entrepreneurial perspective than taking a traditional nonprofit approach is because you can be more entrepreneurial. And you can launch it as an LLC, or we even have the benefit corporation legal status in the state of Alabama. I think it was 5 years ago that they rolled that out, and we were the 38th state to get it. I remember when we got it in Illinois, it took a while to catch on, but a lot of individuals who would normally launch nonprofits, but they really kind of don't want to. I know you get no corporate tax, but you also have to have a board that's very risk averse, and they're going to hamstring you, and it's going to be hard to really make moves. Well, you can launch a benefit corporation, you still get lower taxes, you still do pay taxes, but you have a lot more entrepreneurial autonomy to do the kinds of things you want to do as an entrepreneur. Those social enterprises, I know everybody's interested in technology. Social enterprises are the most technologically enabled entrepreneurial ventures in the world. Think of all the bleeding edge technology that's out there, whether it's cryptocurrency being used to serve people in broken economies where there's market failure, or crowdfunding, or micro loans, which are high technology or decentralized autonomous organizations that do a lot of this work, or even the space stuff. Like, why do they say we want to go to Mars or launch a rocket or do this? They'll say stuff like, to make humanity multiplanetary. Why? Well, because if we get hit with an asteroid, there we won't all die because there'll be some of us up there. It's like I know it sounds far fetched, but that is a social enterprise argument. There's a why. There's always a why. You don't always get a good why in the for-profit world, but with social enterprises you do. And I'm telling you, the social and the technological realms are converging. All the leading edge technology has a social purpose almost baked into it naturally. So if anyone's going to be sad about, oh man, we're not talking about tech, we're talking about social enterprise, we're going to be talking about tech, actually using tech in new ways because we'll be doing it from a place of strength and playing to our strengths and using it in ways that flow from our culture. To me, that's the future of our ecosystem. We're about 5 or 10 years away. That's my personal view as an ecosystem builder. Um, I'm gonna let you comment on what I just said because I just dropped a lot, and then we'll try to warm these folks up.
You did just drop a lot. Well, what I was thinking as you were speaking, I wanted to ask you about artificial intelligence. And I know everyone, I, I was thinking about profit motives and this profit okay, so when I think about social enterprise, right, or even impact capital, right, I think of it all on a spectrum. And what you just said about interplanetary, that's a why, right? A social enterprise has a why. For a corporation or a for-profit entity, that why is normally cash or profit, whereas for a social enterprise, it's some sort of social good. But what I was wondering is how true that is and the balance of kind of good. How do you determine what is quote unquote good? Um, so the balance between what is good and then profitability. I don't know if my question's
No,
coming
I
out
got
right,
you.
but
I
okay.
got you. I got you. So in the legal status that I mentioned, there's reporting requirements each year that are designed to keep you on track. Um, and you're exactly right. Like if you do form an LLC or an S corp or something, and then you try to do too much socially purposeful work, your shareholders and investors can actually sue you because you're not maximizing their investment. I mean, legally, you can unintentionally get yourself into trouble. And then again, with the nonprofit sector, nonprofits are great, but I know some pretty inefficient nonprofits that do not actually make any impact at all. And it may be big dollars, big money, but there's actually a lot of waste and there's not a lot of impact when a leaner social enterprise approach would work better. Mind you, you can launch for-profit or social enterprise subsidiaries of large nonprofit organizations to work on these problems. I don't mean to oversimplify this here, but you're exactly right. The legal status is designed to keep you on track where, because the fact is you can charge more if you're, just putting a green leaf on a shampoo bottle, people will pay like 40% more for it. I mean, there is a lot of money in this social purpose, but the legal system is lagging behind, but it is moving toward keeping founders accountable. So like greenwashing is a term in sustainability. You don't want people to be able to abuse the image of social purpose just in order to make money. I think communities, I'm a big fan of strong communities where people talk to each other like we're doing here. That has a way of working on that and fixing that. It has a way of keeping people honest and focused. The legal system is improving. So yeah, I hear your concern, and it is a concern, but it's a concern in the nonprofit world. It's a concern in the for-profit world, and I think we're moving in the right direction.
So I have a question for you. Um, and I'm wondering if I were thinking of starting an entity and I wanted to, because I'm trying to solve XYZ problem, what is the kind of process that you think a person should go through to determine if it's going to be a nonprofit, a for profit, or that third way?
Think about whether or not the problem you're solving is something traditionally served or resolved by the state. These are usually education, food, justice, criminal law, things like that. Um, Things that are very low in the hierarchy of values that we all sort of operate by. Then, secondly, think about whether or not that particular problem needs to be served in a particular way based on the community that it's in. So, homeless or unhoused issues in Birmingham are different than the city of Chicago. but you call them unhoused and homeless there, you call them unhoused and homeless here. Same essential problem, but the way you'd have to serve it because of local differences, local community differences, is very different. If if that is true, if the way you need to serve a problem is culturally laden, then a social enterprise is the best way to do it. Because social enterprises have the power to customize and tailor their offering and the way they transact business. And then, especially as the community changes, they can pivot. And then it makes more sense theoretically, academically, to do a social enterprise. And then to get it off the ground, I mean, that's a whole different conversation. I don't think you're asking about that, but that is like when I work with entrepreneurs, and it's all I do. This is where I go to figure that out. And yeah, I mean, that gears you for local action because again, we talked about think global, act local. If you think global but act global, you're going to treat the unhoused in Birmingham the same way you treat them in the city of Chicago. You will fail in one or both places if you do that. You need to customize the work to meet the local culture where it is in terms of its development and its trends.
Thank you. So does that resonate, what he just said about thinking globally but acting locally? Like, can y'all think of any approaches that we have taken in Birmingham that are maybe different than how people are approaching that same issue someplace else, or that we could be? You're like, yeah.
I'd be interested to hear if anybody like wants to just educate me or us for that matter about our city. Like, what do you think's going on here that we really need to know about or work on? I mean, how are things done? How do you want them to be done? I mean, I didn't move. I mean, we're not here to play. We're here to work. We are in the city of Birmingham to do things and work, and we put in the hours and we do it. So, if anyone has anything to share about the ecosystem that you want everyone in this room to know about, speak up, please.
One thing I noticed is there's a so one thing I've noticed is there's a lot of overlap between the big corporations here in Birmingham and the not-for-profit sector. Like, there's the event T-shirt and the same 10 sponsors are on the back. And what I wonder about, or what I wish was happening more, was some of that corporate sponsorship going towards startup, social enterprise. Maybe having a bigger ecosystem there than this really fully developed not-for-profit sector.
Yeah, I was actually going to talk about the different sources of capital for those different entities that we talked about also. So just like the enterprises are on a spectrum, capital really is on a spectrum from purely philanthropic to, the kind that is purely seeking profits and full returns. And then that third way, and it's several in between, but really the one that's looking for that maybe double or triple bottom line sometimes. That is a really interesting point. Birmingham has a huge nonprofit space, but I think that is because, to the point that he just mentioned about government services, our populace is typically neglected by public services. And so I think that we have to solve for that. And that's what for some reason, our government has allowed and kind of let it be the problem of nonprofit organizations to solve these issues. And so that's why I think we have such a huge nonprofit sector. But that is a great point. Are you suggesting that if there were more or greater investment in social enterprises or more capital available for those types of entities, that they could be solving similar problems to the ones nonprofits are attempting to solve?
Yes, it's the capital. It's like there's Revs, the big pitch, which had PNC sponsorship, but there's not a lot of things like that. But to get back to your initial point, what is it unique about this ecosystem that you could build or expand on? Well, maybe how we think about not-for-profits could be a model for how we think about funding social enterprise.
Well, the angel investor ecosystem, if you will, is pretty immature here. I think, the type of investor that would get excited about an entrepreneurial venture and get behind it and do a deal with them and support them. There's not a lot of those here. The people and the firms with money here that will invest it, they think more like a bank, which is, I mean, they try to minimize risk. You don't want to minimize risk if you're a good angel investor. You want more risk. You want smart risk that you believe in, because they know you do not get rewards without risk. So you want the risk to be big, but you want to believe in it and you want to research it. So it's not about minimizing risk. It's about optimizing and not maximizing, but optimizing risk. And a good angel community knows that. We don't have a good angel community here yet. We will, as you know, again, I've been watching this ecosystem for a long time, but as more social enterprises emerge that are doing things that folks with money, with resources, and firms with money and resources can't afford to ignore. That's the key. Man, that is just so good. They can't afford to ignore it. They need to be part of it. That's the way it always works. I mean, there's a lot of money in this state and in this town. I'm telling you, I've raised money in this town. I've had conversations. I know there's a lot of money here. You do something that they can't afford to ignore, they will beat a path to your door. But I don't think we're doing it in a way that plays to the strengths of the culture yet, which my personal opinion is really world-class social enterprise that generates revenue, but also generates social or ecological impact. I think a lot of the resources will wake up and reorient themselves as we start doing more and more of that. And this is generational. I mean, there's a couple of Gen Z in the room, but I taught millennials for 20 years. They were kind of into the do good and do well, but man, this Gen Z, they don't even make a difference between doing good and doing well. Like my generation, like, you want to make money? All right, briefcase, suit, yeah. Oh, you want to do good? You're going to be hugging a tree or serving soup with no money. This generation, and I think it's related to social and technological, it's converged. They do not distinguish between those two things because they've grown up with information technology and they've learned about things that they want to learn about, and they've got this sense of identity where the why is inextricably connected to the what, versus in earlier generations, and one call it like that. So I think it's generational. I think more social enterprises will emerge here doing very interesting things. And then the folks here that want to invest in programs that they know are good for the community, they will wake up and support them. But if we're going to be like tech this, tech that, Austin, Nashville, not going to work, baby. Not going to work.
The other thing I'll say is there is, I'm sorry, philanthropic capital that is attempting to expand into this space. They're moving slowly but surely. And so there are some foundations around here, and I'd be happy to share some with you that are looking to figure out how to make those types of investments. And so that, in my mind, philanthropic capital then gets to serve as the risky capital that kind of de-risks it, if you will, for financial institutions and that sort of thing. It's Kayla.
Hello. I'm in deep agreement about the types of capital and the types of entities. When I was looking at my own kind of social good venture, I was looking at B Corps. And I want to say it was Alabama Power at the time had a program, but they had just kind of rolled it back. And so as I was doing my research, there didn't seem to be much benefit at all to being a B Corp here when most of the money wanted to go through a 501c3. But I agree that I think a social enterprise is much better. And to the point about many of the organizations not making real impact, I do think the capitalist part of the enterprise is enough of a incentive to actually make impact, because you are not only now accountable to people who have invested money, but you're accountable to customers. And I don't think the nonprofit culture here identifies the communities they're serving as clients. And so there isn't a lot of accountability to them. It is solely to the data that they need to turn into their funders so that they can continue to get that money. And I think that the way the ecosystem currently is not really conducive to changing anything. And so I'm really curious. I don't know what it looks like in other cities or what the catalyst needs to be to kind of spark. I don't know if that looks like outside investment into social enterprises so that the city can see that they work and then that changes everybody else's mind, or is that going to be one brave funder who can take the risk to, but it feels very much like everyone's comfortable and they do want to do things that are not risky, and they rather just do the things that are normal and seem like they work, and we can just keep kicking the ball down the street until, I don't know until, but my hope is that something would change, because I don't even necessarily think about separating well and good, because I'm like, if it is good, you're gonna do well, right? Like if we're solving problems, particularly those that are economic, if people are making more money, we're all gonna be better off. And so I'm like, why? This just seems like it makes sense. Or like, if you want people to buy the thing that you are selling, you want to make sure people have money to buy the thing that you're selling, right? Like to me, that just makes sense, but that doesn't seem to be how our ecosystem.
Sounds like we need a social enterprise pitch competition. I like it. I'm willing to go sell it. And also, I'm glad Dr. Hood is smiling, because he gonna go with me and we gonna sell it. But what you are describing to me is an environment that is ripe for disruption. And I know that we don't often think about it in that way, but even when we did the accelerator, there was a lot of pushback in the way that we were thinking about doing it. And so people that are used to doing things the way that they've always done them are going to push back. And yes, we are very comfortable. I call it the nonprofit industrial complex here in Birmingham. But I think you probably have to pitch like a startup. You know how they are like constantly, everybody they come in contact with, somebody's gonna, I think, if you really are selling what you say you're selling, right? I think somebody's gonna bite, and then that's all it takes. You can be that spark.
Can I do a little closing remark?
I had a question too, and
Okay.
it's the organizer, but I have a question. This is great. And then I know, sir, you have a question as well. Well, and it's not necessarily a question, but it's a thought. So even for myself, like Polaris is a social enterprise, but I think one of the opportunities is a narrative shift, right? Like exposing people to what it means to really have a social enterprise. Because even with the work that I do, the first question I got was, "That's amazing. Do you have a nonprofit?" And I was like, "No, why would I? I'm for profit," right? And there were even people in the space who didn't want to work with me because they thought I was a for profit. And going back to like the scarcity mindset, it's like, well, if you're doing this and I'm doing this, surely we can't coexist, because only one person can solve all these problems, right? So there's that challenge there, but I think there is opportunity to shift the narrative in terms of helping people to understand what is social enterprise, because we have a lot of problems that need to be solved in Birmingham, but we also have a lot of creative, amazing people who want to solve those problems. But it sounds like, based on the structure, there's no space for them, right? But either you are a nonprofit and you focus on whatever folks want you to solve for the money that they're going to give you, or you just do whatever you need to do, make your money, take care of your family, and you look at everybody else have issues and challenges. So I think there's an opportunity to really shift the narrative and help people to understand what social enterprise is all about. And I'm on board with helping to organize that pitch competition. So y'all put me on the committee.
Thank you.
If you want, we can. We do have one in the fall at UAB. It's called Pitch Your Passion. It's primarily for the UAB community, but, and you got me on record here, if you want to open it up and invite more of the community into that Pitch Your Passion social enterprise pitch competition, we could partner on that, and we will do that. She's shaking her head. We'll do that. Just a short observation. These problems we're talking about, they're like on the demand side of the equation. They call for a supply side solution. The supply side solution is the next generation. And that means it takes time. That's why I say it takes 5 or 10 years. The young people coming up and the not young people who are going to be exiting, as that evolves, this new understanding of entrepreneurship, especially social enterprise, you're going to see the needle's not going to be moving. The gauge will be recalibrating. It'll be a redefinition of what it means to be entrepreneurial in Birmingham. That, again, I've been here 7 years. It's just my observation, and I know something about how ecosystems evolve. But the supply side solution is the young generation, which means education is key. We really, really need to get more serious about education here. university education, high school education, whatever it is, big time. Because as that young generation comes up, it's pretty easy to learn how to put a business together. It's really actually hard to think about it in terms of being a social enterprise and all the stuff we're kind of talking about now. That's what we educate them to get that mindset. But we need a supply side solution. And the next generation, if I told you I love Gen Z, 2 Gen Zs right there, I am very optimistic about our future when I meet these young Gen Z people.
Good evening. My name is Antonio Davis, partner at F6 Tours. So please check out f6tours.com. But my biggest question and concern is I see a lot of people start, but it's like like something holding us back from going all the way in as we should. Like we get 90% and that last 100% to make it big is like Birmingham scared to win at anything but Alabama football. Like to me, that's what I see. We get to that 90, we won't go win. We like get content with okay, I've started a business, I've started a nonprofit, but your impact can be so much more, and that's what something I work on a lot is telling people go ahead and get that last 10% and win and embrace it and help others win. And just could you just talk about like how to help others, myself and others get beyond that last hurdle of embracing our success and help spreading our success throughout the community.
I'll get on that real quick and then let's see. When do people do that? When do they not finish the race? When they don't believe in what they're doing. When will you fight somebody who you know you shouldn't be fighting? Only if you really love whatever he's threatening. You have to believe and love whatever you're doing, and you will be fearless if that's the case. If you're faking it, you're going to quit early. I think that principle, which I'm talking about individuals, applies to an extent to the culture here. Because we're not playing to our strengths. I believe the movements that we talked about are a source of strength that we haven't yet learned how to actuate in the form of entrepreneurship. A social enterprise rooted in the culture and the community, especially if you're from here and you know the community and you launched it, you're not going to give up at the last minute. You're not going to do the aw shucks thing and like look at your feet. You'll take it all the way and then some, and then you'll tell the world about it. So I think, and that's how I define authenticity, but playing to your strengths at the ecosystem level means taking the cultural values and embedding them in how you transact business and assemble resources. At a human level, it's the same thing. You just have to know what you're good at, know what you're not good at, and make sure you're doing things that align with what you're good at, and then innovate in relation to what you're good at. Don't fake it. Do what is true to you. I see that at the ecosystem level here because I've seen what you're talking about.
I don't think I can add anything more. I would be curious why you think it is.
I think the same that they make them great in Birmingham, so humble, so loving that we feel like if I succeed, that everybody else got to fail. I don't think that. I think I can succeed and we all can succeed. Birmingham, Alabama, United States is big enough for everybody to succeed in whatever they like to do.
Mm,
Amen.
thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Speaking of Gen Z, my name is Steven. I'm 19 years old. One of the things that I wanted to talk about in today's dialogue is that we would like for Gen Z to be contributors of society, but I believe that society isn't doing enough to contribute back into us as a generation. And one of the things is that we can see a direct correlation between being contributors to society and the mortality rate that's happening here in Birmingham. And one of the things that I would say is that going to social entrepreneurship, as a 19-year-old, sometimes I think we get to the table and those contributors or angel investors will talk to us, tell us that we have a great idea, and then there's no follow-up. So my question would be, how do we pitch our ideas in a way that they take us seriously and that they have a follow-up with us in those meetings?
Well, I'm sure the professor has a response. I'm just going to say, now listening to you, I'm going to imagine that you have all your ducks in a row before you even get in the room, right? Where did you go to undergrad, or where are you in undergrad?
So I just finished high school. This is my second year in college.
What? You go to UAB?
Just transferred from Mouse College,
What's your major?
human rights.
Awesome.
It's a new program. They just started.
I already want to hear about what you have been taking, but the only thing I was going to say is persistence. Like some people are just flaky. You can't control anyone, right? The only person you can control in this situation is you. And so I think fortitude and persistence are necessary. And then sometimes you just have to move on. But I bet he has a better answer.
No, I don't. I don't. I was just going to say you should major in entrepreneurship
And human rights.
and human rights. Yeah, it sounds like a cool program. Uh, take the principle of asking for forgiveness instead of asking for permission. Take it to heart. Take it to heart. Take the principle of ready, fire, aim rather than ready, aim, fire. Take it to heart. So when you do things, do it in a way that they can't afford to ignore. If you want to get support for an idea, this is what we do in our program. We help you assemble some resources and some people and get it up to a level where you're actually doing it on a small scale, but you're doing it. You show that to the people who might want to support it, and then it becomes like it works in the music industry or something. Like great bands or performers, they're already doing it. They just do it on a local level, selling shirts, tickets, shows, writing the songs. The whole model is there, and then the folks that want to invest in that find it and they make it 100 times bigger, but they don't fundamentally change what it is. They would never get that deal if they went to them before they did it and said, "Hey, I'm going to do this. Do you want it?" They didn't ask for permission or ask for anything. They do it, and then the folks show up. So embed that logic into what you're doing, and then make some noise with it, make some good trouble, and really get on their radar. And they will come and they will have a conversation with you. And they might even say, "We don't like what you're doing." You know, why not? Let me tell you why I'm doing it, and then that you can sell them on it, convince them.
I love, love, love that. And I told you he would have a better answer. What it made me think of though was an MVP, which people often talk about in the startup space. I don't normally hear it though when we're talking about services, and certainly not in the social enterprise space. But it definitely seems like that's what you're talking about, right? What's the way that you can do it just enough to show them, right?
I'm really enjoying this conversation. I've been on both the demand side and the supply side of philanthropy. And in my previous, one of my recent roles, I did a lot of funding. And when you think about it, we have a lot of issues, problems in our community. A lot of it is around inequality and disparities. And these disparities in health, in housing, in the economy, employment, you name it. But we also have this proliferation of nonprofits. And so you have people come to me, even when I was at UAB, people say, "Hey, can you help me write a business plan for a nonprofit? What do you want to solve?" "I want to solve hunger." "Okay, we got 13 nonprofits that are addressing hunger. Why should you be the 14th? And oftentimes people don't have a good answer for it. It's like, well, the problem is still here, and these other organizations are not doing it well, so I'm going to do it well. And from a funder standpoint, the funder is like, well, I'm already supporting 6 of these organizations that are doing very similar, almost the exact same thing. So there's a lot of fatigue from the funder standpoint. And I think oftentimes we have this either or, like either you're going to be a social enterprise or you're going to be a nonprofit. Oftentimes, what I encourage people to say, hey, instead of you starting the 14th nonprofit, why don't you just partner with an existing nonprofit? Maybe you start a social enterprise and focus on the social enterprise part, and then let the philanthropic part come alongside you. And then we have the Penny Foundation, we have Community Foundation, and other nonprofits that can serve as a fiscal agent so that you can still gain the benefits of getting the philanthropic capital without having to go through all the hoops of starting another nonprofit. So I would love just to see more partnerships between the for-profit entities and the existing nonprofits. I think the funders will be happy about that. I think we can remove some of this competition that happens in the nonprofit sector and move it probably where it should be on the for-profit side. And there we can have that kind of disruption and competition. And I think we can probably make a lot more impact on some of these issues that are in our community.
100% agree. I think people think it's difficult to come up with ways to generate revenue for a social enterprise. I think many nonprofits think about that because as we've seen grants drying up over these last few months, I've heard a lot of conversation around diversification of revenue for nonprofits. And how do I have a service or a revenue, a service, a revenue generator in my pipeline or my portfolio of offerings? And so I think even, again, like getting people to switch that type of thinking is something that I would love to see us do.
And it sounds to me like folks chasing or almost copying ideas. You don't want to copy the what, you want to copy the why. But you also need to remember that in a gold rush, the miners usually don't get rich. It's the people who sell things to the miners. So Anthony makes a great point. What I would do if I wanted to make an impact in that space is I would look at the 13 nonprofits and then find out a problem that applies to all of them, something that they're all not doing that they would like to do better, but they probably can't because of whatever structural reasons, and then offer it up as a way to partner with them, and you're effectively extending their impact, but you are also effectively launching your own socially purposeful entrepreneurial venture.
I have a follow-up question. So I think we've talked a lot about the culture in Birmingham, and one of the things I was thinking about as you were speaking is I feel like a part of the nonprofit culture is it just seems like the walls are too high, and like there's almost like an air of prestige around being in these nonprofits because the opportunities are so far and few in between. What would that, because I agree with what you said, but practically what, because it almost feels like cliquish, almost like this is our insider crew, and I'm coming from a place where I was in the nonprofit field, and if you're not a cultural match, which can mean a lot of things, you kind of find yourself on the outskirts. So how do you play that game? Because what y'all are saying is true, but I am having trouble visualizing that because of the culture in Birmingham.
I just wanted to say, I also, no offense, hate nonprofits. And I didn't want to start one. And I did exactly what you said because that's what I thought. And what I found was all of the organizations were playing to the request of the funders, and they also didn't want to take a chance on programming. They didn't see it as worth the risk. And I was like, I am bringing you an opportunity to get more money from somebody else. And all I need you to do, like, I have the program, the curriculum, the people. And they were just like, well, no, the funder over here said these are the three things they're looking for. So we only really want to do that. And that's the only place they wanted to put their capacity. So to that question, like, that feels like a culture thing to me. How do we practically make that happen?
This is just last edition. I'm glad we're thinking the same thing. But because funding has been like taken away, like so much funding within the humanities and the arts, the money, organizations might look like they're doing okay and they're not. So that's also an additional level or layer.
When would you say is the right time to build out the social enterprise arm of a for-profit business?
When you don't have to think about it. If you have to think about it, don't do it. There comes a point where it's like, I got to do this. Like, what must be done? I got to do it because it's hitting you at the level of your values, not the level of your thoughts. If you're still thinking about it, I generally wouldn't do it. Whatever the problem is that your nonprofit or your organization is solving, you probably know about it through experience. That means you're day in and day out perceiving it. And if something is not quite right, it'll hit you at an instinctive level. Keep it in the back of your mind, but wait until something sparks you where you don't have to think about it. I'm a big believer in the principle of if you have to think about it, don't do it. If you know, man, I got to do this, wait until that moment comes. And if you're still thinking about the problem for a year or two, it will come. It will eventually come. To me, I'm not knowing much about what you're doing, but that's a very useful principle that I've used with entrepreneurs.
Thank you.
And I know we didn't quite answer y'all's question. So personally, I like to work with folks to match them with organizations and people that I know are open to that. And part of it, this is so trite to say, but part of it is just that, right? Like meeting the right people, talking to the right person. You never know when or where that can occur. And I hate that that has been your experience when you've tried to take, ideas and opportunities to folks and they have been non-responsive or responded negatively. But again, to me, that's one of those things that we can't control, right? And so we just have to push on until keep asking, until we find the right person, right organization that can help us. And I'd be happy to help to chat with both of y'all.
Yeah, if there's anything I can do as well, my program, the Bearfield Entrepreneurship Program, or UAB, anyone here, I know a lot of you, but never hesitate to reach out. We've trained a lot of really phenomenal young entrepreneurs, very financially successful. I've had the best young entrepreneurs here than I've ever had anywhere in my career, big time. And we work with a lot of entrepreneurs as well. So like the problem you just said, how can I break through? That would be a phenomenal outreach project for us. We have a social and community enterprise seminar that's very intense and it's outreach oriented. And I could imagine a team of 4 or 5 of the students working with you to set up a plan to do that, to make that kind of impact. We do that, and it's good for us because that's how I'm teaching these young entrepreneurs. But it's good for the community because it makes an impact on you guys. I think I don't know if we're about wrapping up or not. I just wanted to say I don't know if you guys are aware or not. Maybe you are, but conversations like this aren't really going on in a lot of ecosystems around the country. It's nothing like this. I mean, this is how movements start. There's a group of people here thinking about the future, looking at what is and what needs to be better, and having a really constructive, critical conversation about it. The whole time I was in the city of Chicago, we never had meetings like this. Not once. And we were having meetings every week about all kinds of stuff. We're talking about how cool we are, some kind of cool stuff. We were not like talking about rolling our sleeves up and doing something about it. So this makes me incredibly optimistic about where we're headed. And I've been telling people, I've been here 7 years now, but I've been telling people about that. I've been telling people that since I got here, but I think people are starting to believe it now. Because this is legit. I mean, Alicia, what you've done here at Polaris to pull this event together, I mean, this is another great, authentic Birmingham conversation for me. I'm gonna be buzzing all night. I'm probably gonna go to Bricktops and get a steak later, man. I'm excited. So thank you for your attention and thank you for having me. And thank you. It was wonderful to sit down and have this conversation with you.
Thank you very much. I'll echo your sentiments. Thank you so much, Polaris, Alicia, the team of volunteers here for bringing us together to have this conversation. I think it's the first of many. So invite me back.